Hey guys, tonight we begin with the disturbing, deadly, and surprisingly democratic world of medieval dentistry, where a toothache wasn't just painful, it was potentially fatal, and your local barber was more likely to yank out your molars than cut your hair. This wasn't healthcare, it was survival with a side of religious superstition and some very questionable tools. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in medieval Europe with a throbbing pain in your jaw. Your tooth feels like someone's hammering a red-hot nail into your skull. But this isn't just discomfort. This is a death sentence waiting to happen. Because in the medieval world, dental problems didn't just hurt. They killed, and the solutions were often worse than the problems themselves. Let's start with the obvious question. What exactly were medieval people putting in their mouths? Well, their diet was doing them no favors. Bread was the staple food, but it wasn't the soft, refined stuff we know today. Medieval bread was coarse, gritty, and often contaminated with actual stones from the grinding process. Every bite was like chewing sandpaper mixed with rocks. Over time, this literally wore teeth down to nubs. Sugar wasn't widely available to common folk, but that doesn't mean their teeth were safe. Honey was the primary sweetener, and when you could get it, you consumed it eagerly. Medieval people also had a disturbing fondness for extremely hard foods. Dried meats that required serious jaw work, nuts that could crack molars, and grains that hadn't been properly processed. And then there was the ale. Everyone drank it, men, women, children, because water was often contaminated. But medieval ale was thick, cloudy, and full of residue that coated teeth in a film of fermented grain. It was like painting your teeth with bacteria food every single day. The result? By age 20, most people had significant tooth decay. By 30, they were missing several teeth. By 40, if they lived that long, their mouths were disaster zones of infection, pain, and rot. So what happened when your tooth started aching? First, you tried home remedies. Medieval people believed that toothaches were caused by tiny worms burrowing into your teeth. The solution? Smoke. They would hold their mouths over burning herbs, hoping the smoke would drive out the tooth worms. Sometimes they'd chew on specific plants. Willow bark, which actually contains a compound similar to aspirin, or cloves, which do have mild numbing properties. But when home remedies failed and the pain became unbearable, you had limited options. You could pray a lot. Medieval people believed dental pain was divine punishment for sin, so they'd make pilgrimages, light candles, and beg saints for relief. Saint Apollonia was the patron saint of toothaches, having had her teeth brutally extracted during her martyrdom. Or you could seek professional help, and that's where things got truly terrifying. Medieval dentistry wasn't performed by dentists, it was performed by barbers. The same person who cut your hair and shaved your beard was also expected to pull your teeth, set your bones, and perform minor surgery. Their shops were identified by the red and white striped pole. Red for blood, white for bandages. Comforting, right? These barber surgeons had no formal medical training. They learned through apprenticeship and trial and error, mostly error. Their tools were basic and brutal, iron pliers, crude extractors, and sometimes just their bare hands. Anesthesia didn't exist. Pain relief meant biting down on a piece of wood or leather and hoping you pass out quickly. The extraction process was a public spectacle. You'd sit in a chair in the town square while the barber surgeon wrestled with your tooth. Crowds would gather to watch, sometimes placing bets on how long you'd scream. The barber would grip your head between his knees, grab the tooth with his pliers, and yank. Hard. Sometimes the tooth came out cleanly, sometimes it shattered, leaving infected fragments in your jaw. Sometimes the barber grabbed the wrong tooth entirely, and sometimes the force of extraction would dislocate your jaw or fracture your skull. But let's say the extraction went well. Your tooth was out, your jaw was intact, and you were still conscious. Now what? Well, now you had an open wound in your mouth that was guaranteed to become infected. Medieval people had no understanding of germs or sterile procedure. The barber's tools were dirty, his hands were filthy, and your mouth was full of bacteria. Infection was almost inevitable. Your gums would swell, pus would form, and the infection could spread to your bloodstream. This was called sepsis, though medieval people just called it bad humors or God's will. Without antibiotics, sepsis was usually fatal. Some people tried to prevent infection by rinsing with wine or vinegar, which actually had some antiseptic properties. Others would pack the wound with herbs or even spider webs, believing they had healing powers. Mostly, they just prayed and hoped for the best. But tooth extraction wasn't the only dental procedure available. For those wealthy enough to afford it, there were attempts at tooth replacement. Medieval dentists would try to transplant teeth from other people, usually poor people who sold their healthy teeth for money, or corpses who no longer needed them. These transplants never worked. The body would reject the foreign tooth, infection would set in, and the patient would often end up worse than before. But the wealthy were desperate enough to try anything. There were also attempts at what we might call cosmetic dentistry. Wealthy women would sometimes have their teeth filed to points, believing this made them more attractive. Others would blacken their teeth with various concoctions, as black teeth were considered fashionable in some circles. And then there were the truly bizarre treatments. Some medieval texts recommended holding a live frog in your mouth to cure toothache. Others suggested wearing a necklace made from human teeth. One popular remedy involved catching a spider at midnight during a full moon and wearing it in a bag around your neck. The wealthy had access to slightly better care. Court physicians who had studied in universities understood anatomy better than barber surgeons. They might attempt more sophisticated procedures, like drilling holes in teeth to release pressure or using heated metal instruments to cauterize infected tissue. But even royal dentistry was horrifying by modern standards. Queen Elizabeth I, who lived much later than the medieval period but still dealt with primitive dentistry, was said to have terrible teeth that were black with decay. When she finally allowed a tooth to be extracted, she reportedly screamed so loudly that her courtiers could hear her throughout the palace. The irony is that medieval people actually understood some aspects of dental hygiene better than we might expect. They knew that cleaning their teeth was important. They used twigs from certain trees as toothbrushes, fraying the ends to create bristles. They would rub their teeth with coarse cloth or scrape them clean with small knives. Some medieval toothpastes were surprisingly sophisticated. Recipes included ground bones, oyster shells, and various herbs. These were abrasive enough to remove plaque, but gentle enough not to damage enamel. Well, not too much. The wealthy might use imported spices like cinnamon or cardamom to freshen their breath. Others chewed on herbs like mint or fennel, but these were luxuries most people couldn't afford. For the common folk, dental hygiene was basic and often harmful. They might rinse their mouths with urine, believing it had cleansing properties. They'd chew on rough bread to scrape their teeth clean, not realizing this was actually wearing away their enamel. And here's something that might surprise you. Medieval people didn't smile very often. Showing your teeth was considered rude, aggressive, or even demonic. A closed-mouth expression was the ideal, partly for social reasons, but also because most people's teeth were too horrifying to display. The connection between dental health and overall health was poorly understood. Medieval physicians knew that tooth pain could make you sick, but they didn't understand that dental infections could spread throughout the body. They didn't know that poor oral hygiene was linked to heart disease, stroke, and pregnancy complications. What they did understand was that dental problems were a mark of poverty and low status. Wealthy people with better diets and access to care kept their teeth longer. Poor people lost their teeth young and were often mocked for their gap-toothed grins. This created a vicious cycle. Poor dental health made it harder to eat nutritious food, which made overall health worse, which made people more susceptible to disease and early death. Dental problems weren't just painful. They were a pathway to social and economic decline. Religious authorities had their own theories about dental pain. Some believed it was punishment for the sin of gluttony. Others thought it was a test of faith, like Job's suffering in the Bible. Prayer, fasting, and pilgrimage were often prescribed alongside or instead of physical treatment. Monasteries sometimes served as informal dental clinics. Monks who had studied medicine would attempt tooth extractions and other procedures. They had access to better tools and knowledge than most barber surgeons, but they were still working with medieval limitations. Some monastic texts contain surprisingly detailed descriptions of dental procedures. They understood the importance of keeping tools clean, though they didn't understand why. They knew that certain herbs could reduce pain and inflammation, even if they didn't understand the chemical compounds involved. But even in monasteries, dental care was primitive and dangerous. Monks would pray over their patients, believing that divine intervention was just as important as physical treatment. Sometimes they were right. Patients who received spiritual comfort along with medical care often did better than those who received only physical treatment. The fear of dental procedures was so intense that many people preferred to suffer in silence rather than seek help. They would endure months or even years of agonizing pain rather than submit to extraction. Some would tie strings around loose teeth and slam doors, hoping to yank them out quickly. Others would drink themselves into oblivion before dental procedures, using alcohol as a crude anesthetic. This sometimes worked, but also sometimes led to complications when drunk patients couldn't cooperate with their barber surgeons. Children were not spared from dental horrors. Medieval people believed that baby teeth needed to be pulled to make room for adult teeth. They would yank out children's teeth with the same brutal tools used on adults, often causing permanent damage to developing jaw structures. Teething infants were given hard objects to chew on: bones, stones, pieces of coral. These were supposed to help teeth break through the gums, but they often caused injuries or choking. Some parents would rub honey or wine on their baby's gums, which provided temporary relief, but promoted tooth decay. The life expectancy of medieval people was partly determined by their dental health. Severe dental infections could kill quickly, but chronic dental problems led to malnutrition, weakened immune systems, and increased susceptibility to other diseases. Archaeological evidence from medieval cemeteries tells the story clearly. Skulls show evidence of massive dental disease, abscesses, and crude extraction attempts. Many show signs that infection spread from teeth to jawbones and beyond. Some skeletons show evidence of attempted dental treatments: holes drilled in teeth, metal wires used to hold loose teeth in place, even primitive attempts at dental implants using carved bone or ivory, but the most common finding is simple tooth loss. By the time of death, many medieval people had lost most or all of their teeth. They survived by eating soft foods, soups, and gruels that required no chewing. This affected their nutrition and health in ways that cascaded throughout their lives. Without teeth, they couldn't eat meat effectively, leading to protein deficiency. They couldn't chew vegetables and grains properly, leading to digestive problems and vitamin deficiencies. The social implications were severe too. Toothless people were often seen as prematurely aged, unattractive, and of lower status. They spoke differently, with lisps and slurred words that marked them as dental casualties. And yet somehow, medieval people adapted. They developed cooking techniques that made food soft and digestible. They created social customs that didn't require showing teeth. They found ways to manage pain and infection with the limited tools available to them. Some medieval dental practices were actually quite sophisticated. Dental texts from the period show understanding of tooth anatomy, the importance of oral hygiene, and the connection between diet and dental health. The famous medieval physician Albucasis wrote detailed descriptions of dental instruments and procedures. His texts included illustrations of dental tools that wouldn't look entirely out of place in a modern dental office. Islamic physicians during the medieval period were often more advanced than their European counterparts. They developed better surgical techniques, understood the importance of cleanliness, and had access to more sophisticated tools and materials. But for the average person in medieval Europe, dental care remained primitive, painful, and dangerous. The lucky ones died quickly from their dental infections. The unlucky ones suffered for years, their lives defined by constant pain and the fear of seeking treatment. So the next time you complain about a dental cleaning or a minor filling, remember the medieval patient sitting in a town square, biting down on a leather strap while a barber surgeon wrestles with their infected molar using iron pliers and brute force. Remember that for them, a toothache wasn't just inconvenient. It was potentially fatal. And the cure was often worse than the disease, performed without anesthesia, antiseptics, or even basic understanding of infection control. In the end, medieval dentistry tells us something profound about human resilience. People found ways to survive and even thrive despite dental horrors that would send us running to the emergency room. They adapted their diets, their social customs, and their expectations to accommodate the reality of primitive dental care. But it also reminds us how far we've come. The next time you're in a modern dental office, with its sterile instruments, effective anesthesia, and genuine understanding of oral health, take a moment to appreciate that you're not living in an age where tooth worms were considered real and prayer was your primary painkiller. Because in medieval times, dental care wasn't health care at all. It was survival, one painful extraction at a time. By the dawn of the medieval period, the Roman Empire had crumbled into dust, taking with it the last remnants of organized dental care. What emerged from the ashes was a world where tooth pain wasn't just discomfort. It was a death sentence wrapped in agony, delivered without anesthesia, and treated by men whose primary qualification was owning a pair of rusty pliers. Welcome to medieval dentistry, where barber surgeons doubled as tooth pullers, where a cavity could kill you faster than a sword, and where the lucky ones simply lost all their teeth by age 30 and called it a blessing. The collapse of Rome hadn't just ended an empire. It had severed the knowledge that kept mouths healthy. Gone were the Roman physicians with their bronze dental tools and surgical manuals. Gone were the public baths and imported toothpastes. What remained was folk wisdom, prayer, and the grim understanding that when your tooth started throbbing, your options were limited, painful, and frequently fatal. Medieval people didn't wake up and think about dental hygiene the way we do. They woke up and prayed their teeth wouldn't betray them that day. Because in a world without Novocaine, without antibiotics, without even the concept of sterilization, dental problems weren't inconveniences. They were potential executions, carried out slowly by bacteria you couldn't see, in a mouth you couldn't properly clean. The medieval approach to dental care was elegantly simple. Ignore it until the pain became unbearable, then find the nearest barber surgeon and hope his hands were steadier than his knowledge of anatomy. These weren't specialists. They were craftsmen who cut hair, pulled teeth, performed surgery, and occasionally led patients to balance their humors, all with the same unwashed hands and the same confidence that what worked for one patient would surely work for another. Picture the scene. You're lying on a wooden table in a dim room that smells of blood and herbs. Your mouth is propped open with a wooden block. The barber surgeon approaches with an iron instrument that looks more like a torture device than a medical tool. There's no anesthesia, no pain relief, just a leather strap to bite down on and the hope that you'll pass out before he's finished digging around in your skull. The tools themselves were crude beyond imagination. Iron forceps, roughly forged and never properly cleaned. Hooks and picks that doubled as kitchen implements. Chisels that had been used to carve stone that morning. Sterilization wasn't a concept. Cleaning was optional. And precision was whatever the barber surgeon could manage while you thrashed and screamed beneath his grip. But here's what made medieval dental extraction truly horrifying. It wasn't just the pain, though that was legendary. It wasn't just the crude tools, though those were terrifying. It was the complete lack of understanding about what they were actually doing. Medieval barber surgeons believed that tooth pain was caused by tiny worms burrowing through your teeth. The solution? Pull the tooth, burn the socket with hot iron, and pray the worms didn't spread to other teeth. This wasn't medicine. This was medieval pest control, performed on your face while you were conscious by someone whose understanding of anatomy came from examining pig carcasses and whose surgical training consisted of watching his predecessor work until the old man died of plague. The procedure itself was a nightmare of medieval efficiency. You'd be restrained, not for your safety, but to keep you from interfering with the barber surgeon's work. The tooth would be gripped with iron forceps, twisted, pulled, and leveraged until something gave way. Sometimes it was the tooth. Sometimes it was the jawbone. Sometimes it was your will to live. If you were fortunate, the tooth came out cleanly, leaving a bleeding socket that would hopefully heal without infection. If you were unlucky, the tooth shattered, leaving fragments embedded in your jaw that would fester and rot for months. And if you were truly cursed by fate, the barber surgeon would slip, driving his tools through the roof of your mouth and into your brain. The aftermath was almost worse than the procedure itself. No antibiotics meant that infection was nearly inevitable. No pain medication meant that the throbbing, burning agony in your jaw would continue for weeks. And no follow-up care meant that if complications arose, you were on your own, left to pray that your body could fight off whatever sepsis was brewing in the ruins of your mouth. Many patients didn't survive the procedure, not from blood loss, though that was a risk, but from shock, infection, and the simple trauma of having part of their skull excavated by a man with dirty hands and questionable motives. Medieval records are filled with accounts of people who went to have a tooth pulled and were found dead days later, their faces swollen beyond recognition, victims of infections that modern medicine could cure with a simple prescription. Those who did survive often wished they hadn't. The constant pain, the inability to eat properly, the social stigma of missing teeth, and the knowledge that any remaining teeth were simply waiting their turn to betray you. Medieval dental extraction wasn't health care, it was survival of the most stubborn, performed by practitioners whose primary qualification was owning the sharpest pliers in town. And yet, despite the horror, the pain, and the mortality rate, people lined up for these procedures because living with a rotten tooth was somehow worse than risking death to remove it. In a world where dental abscess could kill you just as surely as a sword wound, even the most brutal extraction seemed like a reasonable gamble. This was medieval dentistry. No science, no safety, no mercy, just pain, prayer, and the hope that tomorrow your teeth would hurt a little less than they did today. Ah, my dear aspiring scribe, you've stumbled upon the most dangerous territory of all, writing for people who clean their teeth with twigs and think bathing once a month makes them practically aristocratic. Allow me to guide you through the treacherous waters of crafting historically boring content that will send your audience into the most blissful slumber. By the time the 19th century dawned across Europe and the Americas, something remarkable was stirring in the realm of dental care. Not dramatic, mind you. Nothing that would make headlines or inspire poets. Just the slow, grinding progress of human understanding, one careful observation at a time. The year 1800 brought with it a world still largely innocent of bacteria, still mystified by the true causes of tooth decay, still relying on remedies that were equal parts folk wisdom and wishful thinking. But change was coming. Quiet, methodical change that would unfold across the decades like the turning of seasons. Scientists were beginning to peer more closely at teeth, at mouths, at the mysterious processes that turned healthy enamel into painful cavities. They didn't yet know about plaque bacteria or the role of sugar in feeding oral microorganisms. They couldn't see the invisible armies waging war inside every human mouth. But they were learning to observe, to document, to question the old ways. In the early 1800s, most people still cleaned their teeth, much as their ancestors had for centuries. Rough cloths dipped in salt or soot, twigs frayed into primitive brushes, powdered charcoal mixed with honey. The wealthy might afford imported tooth powders from London or Paris, mysterious concoctions that promised to whiten teeth and sweeten breath. These powders often contained chalk, pulverized coral, even ground cuttlefish bone. Some included more exotic ingredients, powdered pearls for the truly affluent, or dragon's blood resin for those who believed in the medicinal properties of distant lands. The toothbrush, though invented in China centuries earlier, was still a luxury item in the Western world. Most brushes were handcrafted, with handles carved from bone or wood and bristles plucked from the necks of Siberian wild boar. The bristles were stiff, almost punishing in their roughness. Brushing one's teeth was less a gentle cleansing ritual than a vigorous scrubbing session that often left gums bleeding and enamel worn. But this was considered normal, even beneficial. Pain, after all, was proof that the cleaning was working. Dental knowledge in 1800 was a curious mixture of ancient wisdom and emerging science. Physicians understood that certain foods could damage teeth. They had observed that sugar, becoming more common as trade routes expanded, seemed to accelerate tooth decay. But they attributed this to sugar's supposed ability to generate heat in the mouth or to attract harmful vapors. The idea that microscopic organisms might be feeding on sugar residue and producing acid was still decades away from discovery. Tooth powder recipes varied wildly across regions and social classes. In rural areas, people ground their own powders from whatever was available. Burnt bread crusts mixed with salt, ashes from specific woods chosen for their supposed purifying properties, crushed eggshells from chickens fed on particular herbs. Urban dwellers could purchase ready-made powders from apothecaries, though the ingredients were often kept secret. Some powders contained mild abrasives like pumice stone. Others included herbs believed to have medicinal properties, myrrh for its antiseptic qualities, cloves for numbing pain, mint for freshening breath. The ritual of teeth cleaning was typically performed once daily, usually in the morning. People would wet their finger or a cloth, dip it in powder, and rub vigorously across their teeth. The process was quick, functional, almost mechanical. There was little understanding of the importance of reaching between teeth or cleaning along the gum line. The goal was simply to remove visible food particles and achieve a sensation of cleanliness. Breath freshening was a separate concern, addressed through various means. People chewed on herbs like parsley or mint leaves. They rinsed their mouths with rose water or diluted wine. Some carried small pieces of licorice root to chew throughout the day. The wealthy might have access to imported spices, cardamom pods, whole cloves, or small pieces of cinnamon bark. These were expensive luxuries, but they served the dual purpose of freshening breath and displaying one's prosperity. As the 1800s progressed, dental understanding began to evolve. Physicians started to recognize patterns in tooth decay. They noticed that people who consumed more sugar suffered more dental problems. They observed that certain occupations seemed to predispose workers to particular types of tooth damage. Bakers, constantly exposed to flour dust, often developed specific patterns of enamel wear. Workers who used their teeth as tools, common in many trades, showed characteristic chips and breaks. The emerging field of chemistry began to influence dental care. Scientists discovered that acids could dissolve tooth enamel, leading to new theories about cavity formation. This knowledge filtered slowly into popular understanding. People began to avoid certain foods thought to be particularly acidic. They experimented with alkaline rinses, hoping to neutralize harmful acids in the mouth. Baking soda, becoming more widely available through improved manufacturing, gained popularity as both a tooth powder ingredient and a mouth rinse. Medical literature of the period shows a growing interest in oral health. Physicians began writing detailed descriptions of dental diseases. They documented different types of tooth decay, gum disorders, and oral infections. These observations, while lacking modern scientific understanding, represented important steps toward systematic dental knowledge. Doctors started to recommend specific tooth powders for different conditions. They advised patients on dietary choices that might preserve dental health. The quality of tooth powders began to improve as competition increased among manufacturers. Apothecaries experimented with different formulations, seeking the perfect balance of cleaning power and gentleness. Some powders became famous for their effectiveness. Others were notorious for their harshness. Word-of-mouth recommendations spread through social networks, creating the first informal systems of dental product evaluation. Social attitudes toward dental care also began shifting. Clean teeth, once primarily a practical concern, started to carry social significance. A bright smile became associated with health, prosperity, and moral virtue. This created pressure for better dental care methods, driving innovation in tooth powders and cleaning techniques. The emerging middle class, with more disposable income and social aspirations, became eager consumers of dental products. Regional variations in dental care practices remained pronounced throughout the early 1800s. In Mediterranean countries, people often used olive oil as a base for tooth powders, believing it to have beneficial properties. Northern European countries favored salt-based preparations. American frontier communities developed their own traditions, often incorporating indigenous plant knowledge. These regional differences reflected not just available materials, but also cultural beliefs about health and cleanliness. The role of diet in dental health was becoming more apparent, though the mechanisms remained mysterious. Physicians observed that people who ate more fruits and vegetables seemed to have healthier teeth. They noticed that those who consumed primarily soft processed foods often suffered more dental problems. These observations led to early dietary recommendations for dental health, though the advice was often mixed with superstition and incomplete understanding. Women's dental care practices differed somewhat from men's during this period. Social expectations required women to maintain wider, more attractive teeth, leading to the use of more aggressive whitening agents. Some women used lemon juice or vinegar as tooth cleaners, not realizing these acids were actually damaging their enamel. others applied various cosmetic preparations to their teeth, including lead-based whiteners that were both ineffective and dangerous. Children's dental care was largely neglected in the early 1800s. Most people believed that baby teeth were unimportant since they would eventually fall out. Children might have their teeth wiped with cloths occasionally, but systematic dental care was rare. This neglect often led to early tooth loss and established poor dental habits that persisted into adulthood. The pace of change in dental care was glacial by modern standards. New ideas spread slowly through communities, often taking years or decades to gain acceptance. Traditional practices persisted alongside newer methods, creating a complex landscape of dental care beliefs and practices. Some people enthusiastically adopted every new tooth powder or cleaning technique. Others remained suspicious of innovation, preferring time-tested methods their grandparents had used. Professional dental care was beginning to emerge as a distinct field, though it remained primitive by today's standards. Barber surgeons still performed most dental extractions, often without anesthesia or proper sterilization. A few specialized tooth pullers traveled from town to town, offering their services at markets and fairs. These early dental practitioners had little formal training, learning their craft through apprenticeship or a trial and error. The tools available for dental care remained basic throughout the early 1800s. Besides toothbrushes and powders, people might use thin wooden picks to remove food from between teeth. Some fashioned these picks from quills or small bones. Metal dental instruments existed, but were primarily used by professional tooth pullers for extractions. The idea of regular professional dental cleaning was still foreign to most people. As the 1800s moved toward their midpoint, the foundation was being laid for more significant advances in dental understanding. The scientific method was beginning to influence medical thinking. Careful observation and documentation were replacing superstition and tradition as the basis for dental knowledge. Though the great breakthroughs in bacterial theory and modern dentistry were still decades away, the stage was being set for revolutionary changes in how people understood and cared for their teeth. This period represents a crucial transition in dental history. The old ways, rooted in centuries of tradition and folk wisdom, were slowly giving way to approaches based on emerging scientific understanding. People were beginning to see their teeth not just as tools for eating, but as important components of overall health and social presentation. The seeds of modern dental care were being planted, though they would take many more years to fully flower. The daily ritual of teeth cleaning during this era was both familiar and foreign to modern sensibilities. The basic human impulse to clean one's teeth remained constant, but the methods, materials, and understanding were vastly different. People approached dental care with the same mixture of hope, habit, and uncertainty that characterizes human attempts to maintain health in any era. They did what they could with what they had, gradually building toward better understanding and more effective practices. As the 1800s progressed, this foundation of practical experience and growing scientific curiosity would prove crucial. The groundwork laid during these early decades would support the dramatic advances that were to come. But for now, in the quiet years of the early 19th century, people simply cleaned their teeth as best they knew how, one careful brushing at a time, slowly building toward a future they could not yet imagine. As the 19th century dawned across Europe and the emerging United States, something remarkable was stirring in the realm of dental care. The primitive tooth cleaning methods that had sustained humanity for millennia were about to encounter the forces of industrialization, scientific inquiry, and social change. What emerged was a century of transformation that would bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern dentistry. Picture yourself in London, 1820. The air hangs thick with coal smoke, and the cacophony of horse-drawn carriages echoing off cobblestone streets. In the drawing rooms of the emerging middle class, a quiet revolution is taking place. For the first time in human history, ordinary people are beginning to think of dental care not as a luxury reserved for the wealthy, but as a necessary part of daily hygiene. This shift didn't happen overnight. It was the result of converging forces that would reshape how humanity approached oral health forever. The Industrial Revolution brought with it more than steam engines and textile mills. It created new social classes, new wealth, and new anxieties about appearance and respectability. Suddenly, having clean teeth wasn't just about avoiding pain or infection. It became a marker of social status, a sign that you belonged to the respectable classes who could afford to care for themselves properly. But perhaps more importantly, the 19th century marked the beginning of what we might call scientific dentistry. The random experimentation and folk wisdom that had characterized dental care for thousands of years was slowly giving way to systematic observation, documentation, and the early stirrings of professional medical practice. The transformation began with the tools themselves. While our ancestors had made do with rough cloths, primitive sticks, and whatever abrasive materials they could find, the 19th century saw the development of the first recognizable toothbrushes. These weren't the sleek plastic instruments we know today, but they represented a quantum leap forward from anything that had come before. The early Victorian toothbrush was a marvel of craftsmanship in its own right. Carved from bone or ivory, with bristles made from the coarse hair of wild boars, these implements were both more effective and more expensive than anything previously available. The wealthy could afford brushes with handles made from silver or even gold, often engraved with family crests or decorative patterns that transformed a mundane hygiene tool into a status symbol. But it wasn't just the materials that made these brushes revolutionary. For the first time, manufacturers were thinking systematically about design. They experimented with different bristle lengths, varying the density of the hair and adjusting the size and shape of the brush head to better reach different areas of the mouth. This wasn't accident or tradition driving innovation anymore. This was deliberate engineering applied to dental care. The working classes, of course, couldn't afford such luxuries, but even they benefited from the broader changes taking place. Mass production techniques, still in their infancy, began to make cheaper versions of toothbrushes available. These might have wooden handles instead of ivory, or bristles from domestic pigs rather than exotic wild boars. But they still represented a significant improvement over the rough rags and wooden sticks their grandparents had used. Alongside better brushes came the development of new tooth powders and early toothpastes. The 19th century saw an explosion of experimentation with different formulations as entrepreneurs and chemists competed to create the most effective cleaning agents. Some of these early attempts were genuinely innovative. Others were little more than marketing gimmicks wrapped in pseudo-scientific language. Charcoal remained popular throughout the century, but now it was often combined with other ingredients to create more sophisticated cleaning compounds. Chalk, which had been used for centuries, was refined and processed to create smoother, less abrasive powders. Enterprising manufacturers began adding flavoring agents, oils of peppermint, wintergreen, and other aromatic substances that made the experience of cleaning one's teeth less unpleasant and more refreshing. The rise of patent medicines in the 19th century also extended to dental care. Advertisements in newspapers and magazines promised miraculous results from various tooth powders and mouthwashes. Dr. Sheffield's creme dentifrice, introduced in 1892, was one of the first toothpastes to be sold in a collapsible tube, an innovation that would become standard practice. These early commercial preparations often contained ingredients that we now know to be harmful, including various acids and even small amounts of arsenic. But they represented important steps toward the development of safe, effective dental care products. The social dimension of dental care also underwent dramatic changes during this period. The emerging middle class, anxious to distinguish itself from both the aristocracy above and the working masses below, embraced dental hygiene as part of a broader culture of respectability and self-improvement. Cleanliness became associated with moral virtue, and having clean teeth was seen as evidence of good character and proper upbringing. This shift had profound implications for how dental care was practiced and taught. For the first time, parents began systematically instructing their children in proper tooth cleaning techniques. Governess and tutors included dental hygiene in their curriculum, alongside reading, writing, and arithmetic. Schools, particularly those serving the middle and upper classes, began to emphasize the importance of daily tooth cleaning as part of their moral and physical education programs. The 19th century also saw the emergence of the first professional dental practitioners who focused specifically on preventive care rather than just extraction and pain relief. These early dentists, many of whom had trained as physicians or apprenticed with established practitioners, began to develop systematic approaches to oral hygiene that went far beyond the folk wisdom of previous generations. They understood, in ways their predecessors had not, the connection between diet and dental health. While people had long observed that certain foods seemed to cause tooth problems, 19th century dental practitioners began to develop more sophisticated theories about why this happened and what could be done to prevent it. They advised their patients to avoid excessive consumption of sugar and acids, to rinse their mouths after meals, and to pay particular attention to cleaning their teeth before bed. The development of better lighting, particularly gas lamps and later electric illumination, also revolutionized dental care. For the first time in human history, people could see clearly into their own mouths and observe the effects of their cleaning efforts. Mirrors became common household items, and people began to take a more active role in monitoring their own oral health. This period also witnessed the first systematic studies of tooth decay and gum disease. While the bacterial theory of disease wouldn't be fully developed until later in the century, Observant practitioners began to notice patterns in how dental problems developed and spread. They observed that certain individuals seemed more susceptible to decay, that problems often began in specific areas of the mouth, and that regular cleaning could prevent or slow the progression of disease. The influence of broader scientific and medical developments cannot be understated. The 19th century was a time of tremendous advances in chemistry, biology, and medicine, and these discoveries inevitably influenced dental practice. The development of anesthesia, while primarily used for surgical procedures, also made dental treatment more tolerable and encouraged people to seek care earlier, rather than waiting until pain became unbearable. Regional variations in dental care practices also became more pronounced during this period as different countries and cultures developed their own approaches to oral hygiene. In Germany, for example, there was a strong emphasis on mechanical cleaning and the development of increasingly sophisticated brush designs. French practitioners focused more on chemical approaches, developing various mouthwashes and tooth powders. British dental care was heavily influenced by class considerations, with elaborate rituals of oral hygiene becoming markers of social status. The American approach to dental care during this period was shaped by the frontier mentality and democratic ideals of the young republic. American dentists were among the first to emphasize that good dental care should be available to all social classes, not just the wealthy elite. This led to innovations in making dental care more affordable and accessible, including the development of less expensive cleaning products and simpler, more practical tooth cleaning techniques. Women played an increasingly important role in dental care during the 19th century. As the guardians of domestic hygiene and family health, mothers became responsible for ensuring that their children developed proper tooth cleaning habits. Women's magazines began to feature articles on dental care, and female writers contributed to the growing literature on oral hygiene and health. The century also saw the development of specialized dental care for children. Earlier generations had generally assumed that children's teeth weren't worth much attention, since they would eventually be replaced by permanent teeth. But 19th century practitioners began to understand the importance of maintaining healthy primary teeth and teaching good habits early in life. By the end of the 19th century, the foundation had been laid for modern dental care. While many of the specific techniques and materials would continue to evolve, the basic principles had been established: regular cleaning with specialized tools, the use of effective cleaning agents, professional supervision and guidance, and an understanding of the connection between oral health and overall well-being. These concepts, revolutionary in their time, would become the cornerstones of 20th century dental practice. The transformation of dental care during the 19th century represents one of the most dramatic improvements in human health and quality of life in recorded history. In the span of just a few generations, humanity moved from the primitive, often painful dental care practices that had characterized most of human existence to something recognizably modern and effective. This period reminds us that progress in human health and well-being is rarely the result of sudden breakthroughs or miraculous discoveries. Instead, it emerges from the gradual accumulation of knowledge, the patient refinement of techniques, and the determination of countless individuals to make life better for themselves and their families. The 19th century dental revolution was built on the shoulders of every person who had ever experimented with a new cleaning method, every practitioner who had carefully observed the results of different treatments, and every parent who had insisted that their children take better care of their teeth than previous generations had been able to do. As we conclude this examination of 19th century dental care, we can see how the stage was being set for even more dramatic changes in the century to come. The scientific method was being applied to dental practice, professional standards were being established, and the general population was becoming educated about the importance of oral hygiene. The foundation was in place for the development of modern dentistry, with its sophisticated understanding of oral bacteria, its advanced materials and techniques, and its emphasis on prevention rather than just the treatment. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, the world of dental care stood at a curious crossroads. The ancient remedies of charcoal and urine were slowly giving way to something resembling science. But this transformation would be neither swift nor comfortable. The 1800s brought progress, yes, but progress wrapped in pain, uncertainty, and the occasional explosion of chloroform. The dawn of the Industrial Revolution brought with it the first glimmers of modern dental practice. Dentistry began its slow crawl out of the barbershops and into something approaching respectability. Pierre Fauchard's innovations from the previous century had planted seeds, and now those seeds were beginning to sprout into recognizable dental practices. The toothbrush, once a luxury item crafted from exotic boar bristles and ivory handles, began its democratic march toward mass production. By the early 1800s, manufacturers were experimenting with different bristle materials and handle designs. The wealthy still preferred their imported boar bristles, but the growing middle class could now afford brushes made from horsehair or even the occasional badger bristle. These weren't the soft, yielding bristles we know today. They were stiff, unforgiving, and had roughly the same texture as a scrub brush designed for cleaning cast iron. Tooth powder evolved as well, though evolution might be too generous a term. The basic formula remained chalk, salt, and hope. But enterprising merchants began adding exotic ingredients. Cinnamon for flavor, though it often burned the gums. Powdered coral for whitening, though it scratched enamel like sandpaper. Some powders contained mercury, because apparently the solution to dental problems was to slowly poison yourself from the inside out. The concept of professional dental care was taking shape, though it moved with all the speed and grace of a three-legged ox. In 1840, the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery opened as the world's first dental school. This was revolutionary. For the first time, people could learn to extract teeth and fill cavities without also learning to trim beards and perform minor surgery. The curriculum was basic but groundbreaking. Students learned anatomy, though their understanding of germ theory was roughly equivalent to their understanding of quantum physics. Dental instruments improved, though improvement is relative when you're starting from medieval torture devices. Forceps became more specialized, with different designs for different teeth. Dental explorers, those sharp little picks that still strike fear into modern hearts, became standard tools. They were crafted with increasing precision, allowing dentists to probe cavities with scientific thoroughness. The patient's comfort during this probing was considered secondary to the educational value. The great breakthrough of the era was anesthesia, though calling it a breakthrough might be overstating things. In 1846, William Morton demonstrated the use of ether for dental surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. For the first time in human history, dental work didn't have to involve conscious suffering. This was genuinely revolutionary. Patients could now sleep through their extractions instead of requiring 4 strong men to hold them down. But early anesthesia was an adventure in itself. Ether was unpredictable. Too little, and the patient would wake up mid-extraction, understandably upset. Too much, and they might not wake up at all. Chloroform was also used, though it had an unfortunate tendency to stop hearts without warning. Dentists had to balance the patient's comfort against the very real possibility of accidental death. Many chose to err on the side of keeping their patients breathing, which meant dental work remained a conscious ordeal for many. Nitrous oxide, laughing gas, offered a middle ground. Discovered by Humphrey Davy in 1799, it took decades to find its way into dental practice. When it did, it provided a strange kind of relief. Patients remained conscious, but found their pain and anxiety transformed into something approaching hilarity. They would giggle through extractions, though whether from the gas or hysteria was often unclear. The mid-1800s brought attempts at more sophisticated restorative dentistry. Gold fillings became the standard for those who could afford them. Gold was malleable, didn't corrode, and gave the patient a glittering smile that announced their wealth to the world. For everyone else, there was amalgam, a mixture of mercury and other metals that was cheap, durable, and only moderately toxic. The process of filling a cavity in the 1800s was an exercise in optimism. The dentist would clean out the decay with hand instruments, basically scraping and digging until they hit healthy tooth structure. There was no high-speed drill, no suction, no rubber dam to keep the work area dry. Just a person with sharp tools, questionable lighting, and a patient who was either unconscious, laughing uncontrollably, or gripping the chair arms hard enough to leave permanent impressions. Dental impressions became more sophisticated, though sophisticated is relative. Beeswax gave way to plaster of Paris, which gave way to various rubber compounds. The goal was to create accurate models of the patient's mouth for making dentures or crowns. The process involved filling the patient's mouth with liquid material and hoping they didn't panic or vomit before it set. Many did both. False teeth underwent their own evolution. The wealthy could afford porcelain teeth set in gold bases, crafted by skilled artisans who understood both dentistry and fine art. These dentures were functional and beautiful, though they required careful maintenance and the occasional adjustment when the wearer's jaw changed shape from age or disease. For the masses, there were cheaper alternatives, teeth carved from ivory, though ivory teeth had a disturbing tendency to yellow and crack. Teeth carved from walrus tusks, which were harder than ivory, but still prone to staining. Some enterprising dentists offered teeth carved from hippopotamus ivory, which was durable, but had an unfortunate tendency to retain the smell of its origin. The most disturbing option was human teeth, harvested from the dead and the desperate. Battlefield teeth, pulled from young soldiers, were particularly prized for their quality and whiteness. The poor would sell their healthy teeth to dentists who would then implant them into the mouths of the wealthy. It was an early form of organ transplantation, though one that carried significant risks of disease transmission and psychological trauma for all involved. Dental hygiene education began to emerge, though it moved with all the urgency of continental drift. Dentists started recommending daily brushing, though their understanding of proper technique was limited. Many recommended brushing with salt or baking soda, which was effective at removing plaque, but also excellent at removing enamel. The concept of gentle brushing was foreign. Most instructions called for vigorous scrubbing, as if the teeth were dirty pots that needed scouring. Mouthwashes appeared on the market, though their effectiveness was questionable. Most were alcohol-based solutions flavored with herbs and marketed with grand claims about their curative properties. They burned like fire, tasted like medicine, and probably killed some bacteria through sheer chemical violence. Whether they improved oral health or simply numbed the mouth enough to mask problems was unclear. The late 1800s brought the first attempts at orthodontics, though these early efforts were crude beyond belief. Crooked teeth were seen as both cosmetic and health problems, but the solutions were often worse than the condition. Early braces were made from gold, silver, or steel wire, tied to individual teeth with silk thread or thin wire. The pressure was constant and often excessive, leading to loose teeth, damaged roots, and considerable pain. Some orthodontists advocated for tooth extraction as a treatment for crowding. Rather than expand the jaw or gradually move teeth, they simply removed the problem teeth. This created space but often resulted in facial collapse and speech problems. The concept of preserving natural teeth was still foreign to many practitioners. Professional dental organizations began to form, bringing some standardization to the field. The American Dental Association was founded in 1859, establishing the first professional standards for dental practice. This was crucial progress, as it separated legitimate dentists from the charlatans and barber surgeons who still pulled teeth as a side business. Dental education improved throughout the century, though improvement was gradual. Students learned basic anatomy and physiology, though their understanding of disease processes was limited. They practiced on cadavers when available and on each other when they weren't. Many dental students graduated with fewer teeth than they started with, having served as practice patients for their classmates. The concept of preventive dentistry began to emerge, though it faced resistance from both practitioners and patients. Many dentists made their living from extractions and dentures. Preventing dental disease meant preventing income. Patients, accustomed to seeking dental care only when in severe pain, were skeptical of the need for regular checkups. Some forward-thinking dentists began advocating for regular cleanings and examinations. They recommended seeing patients every 6 months, a radical idea that many dismissed as unnecessary. The concept of dental prophylaxis, professional cleaning to prevent disease, was born during this period, though it wouldn't become standard practice for decades. Pain management remained primitive despite the introduction of anesthesia. Local anesthetics weren't developed until the 1880s, and even then they were unreliable and sometimes dangerous. Cocaine was used as a local anesthetic, applied directly to the gums before procedures. While effective, it carried obvious risks of addiction and toxicity. Most dental procedures were still performed without adequate pain control. Patients were expected to endure discomfort as part of the treatment. Pain was seen as temporary and necessary, a small price to pay for dental health. This attitude persisted well into the 20th century, shaping generations of dental anxiety. The development of dental x-rays near the end of the century represented a genuine revolution. For the first time, dentists could see inside teeth and below the gum line without cutting or probing. This allowed for earlier detection of problems and more accurate treatment planning. However, early x-ray equipment was dangerous, exposing both patients and practitioners to high levels of radiation. Women began entering the dental profession during the late 1800s, though they faced significant resistance. Lucy Hobbs Taylor became the first woman to graduate from dental school in 1866, paving the way for others. Female dentists often faced discrimination from male colleagues and skepticism from patients, but they persisted and gradually gained acceptance. Dental specialization began to emerge, with some practitioners focusing on specific areas like oral surgery or prosthodontics. This allowed for more advanced treatments and better outcomes, though it also meant that comprehensive dental care became more fragmented. The public health implications of dental disease began to be recognized, though slowly. Dental infections were linked to systemic health problems, including heart disease and kidney problems. This connection wouldn't be fully understood for decades, but the seeds of modern understanding were planted during this period. Dental literature flourished, with journals and textbooks documenting new techniques and theories. This allowed knowledge to spread more quickly and helped establish dentistry as a legitimate medical specialty. Case studies and treatment protocols were shared among practitioners, leading to more standardized care. By the end of the 19th century, dentistry had transformed from a crude trade into something approaching a modern profession. The tools were better, the techniques more refined, and the understanding of oral health more sophisticated. Yet, for the average person, dental care remained an ordeal to be endured rather than a routine part of health maintenance. The century had seen remarkable progress, from the first dental schools to the introduction of anesthesia, from crude hand instruments to precision-crafted tools. But perhaps the most important development was the growing recognition that oral health was connected to overall health, that dental care was not a luxury, but a necessity. As the 1800s drew to a close, the foundation was laid for modern dentistry. The next century would bring even greater advances, but it was the painful progress of the 19th century that made those advances possible. Each extraction performed with better instruments, each filling placed with greater precision, each patient treated with marginally less agony, brought dentistry closer to the sophisticated practice we know today. The transformation was far from complete, but the direction was clear. Dentistry was evolving from a necessary evil into a healing art. One patient, one procedure, one small improvement at a time. Dental hygiene through history, from ancient remedies to professional care. In the 19th century, the realm of dental care underwent a remarkable transformation that would forever change how humans maintained their oral health. What began as crude medieval practices evolved into something approaching modern dentistry. Though the journey was far from smooth, the early 1800s marked a pivotal moment when scientific inquiry began to replace superstition in dental care. Universities started establishing the first formal dental schools, with Baltimore College of Dental Surgery opening in 1840 as the world's first dental institution. These schools produced graduates who understood anatomy, chemistry, and surgical principles rather than relying solely on inherited folklore. Toothbrushes, previously handcrafted luxuries for the wealthy, began mass production. Factories in England and America churned out brushes with boar bristles mounted on bone or wooden handles. While still expensive by working class standards, they became accessible to a growing middle class, eager to embrace new hygiene practices. Tooth powders evolved significantly during this period. The dangerous mixtures of the past gave way to formulations containing chalk, charcoal, and various botanical ingredients. Some included salt, baking soda, or ground pumice stone. Though abrasive by modern standards, these powders represented a vast improvement over earlier concoctions that often contained toxic substances. The introduction of ether and chloroform in the 1840s revolutionized dental surgery. For the first time in human history, patients could undergo tooth extractions and other procedures without excruciating pain. This breakthrough encouraged more people to seek dental care rather than endure suffering until teeth fell out naturally. Professional dental tools became more sophisticated and standardized. Forceps designed specifically for different types of teeth replaced crude pliers. Dental mirrors allowed practitioners to examine areas previously impossible to see clearly. Dental chairs, though basic, provided better positioning for both patient and dentist. The concept of preventive care began taking root, though slowly. Forward-thinking practitioners started advocating for regular cleaning and examination rather than waiting for emergencies. They promoted the radical idea that maintaining healthy teeth was preferable to replacing them with crude dentures. Despite these advances, dental care remained primitive by modern standards. Anesthesia was inconsistent and sometimes dangerous. Infection control was poorly understood, with instruments rarely sterilized between patients. Many procedures that we consider routine today were either impossible or carried significant risk of complications. The late 1800s saw the introduction of the first dental X-rays, allowing practitioners to see problems invisible to the naked eye. This technology, combined with improved understanding of oral anatomy, enabled more precise diagnoses and treatments. By century's end, dentistry had transformed from a trade practiced by barbers and charlatans into a legitimate medical profession. Professional associations formed to establish standards and ethics. Licensing requirements began ensuring that practitioners possessed adequate knowledge and training. However, access remained limited primarily to urban areas and those with sufficient means. Rural populations often continued relying on traditional remedies or traveling tooth pullers who visited towns periodically. The gap between scientific dental care and folk remedies would persist well into the 20th century. The 19th century established the foundation upon which modern dentistry would build. While practices were still crude and often painful, the shift toward scientific methodology, professional education, and systematic approaches marked the beginning of dental care as we recognize it today. The seeds planted during this transformative century would bloom into the sophisticated, pain-free dental treatments we now take for granted. As the 19th century dawned, the world of tooth cleaning was about to undergo its most dramatic transformation yet. Where medieval peasants had gnawed on twigs and Renaissance nobles had dabbed their teeth with cloths soaked in wine, the 1800s would witness the birth of recognizably modern dental care. This wasn't just evolution, it was revolution, driven by industrialization, scientific discovery, and a growing understanding that oral health affected far more than just the mouth. The first major breakthrough came from an unlikely source: mass production. In the early 1800s, toothbrushes were still luxury items, hand-carved from bone or ivory, with boar bristles individually inserted by skilled craftsmen. A single brush could cost more than a week's wages for a common laborer. But the Industrial Revolution changed everything. By the 1840s, factories in England and America were producing thousands of toothbrushes using standardized molds and machinery. Suddenly, what had been a privilege of the wealthy became accessible to the growing middle class. The bristles evolved too. Wild boar hair remained popular, but manufacturers began experimenting with horsehair, which was softer and more readily available. Some even tried badger hair, though it proved too stiff for daily use. The handles shifted from expensive bone to more affordable wood, and later to early forms of celluloid. These weren't just cosmetic changes. They represented a fundamental shift in how society viewed dental care, from a luxury to a necessity. Tooth powders underwent their own transformation. The harsh abrasives of earlier centuries, ground brick dust, crushed shells, gave way to more refined formulations. Chemists began understanding that cleaning didn't require scraping away enamel. Chalk became the base of choice, finely ground and mixed with essential oils for flavor. Orris root, derived from iris flowers, provided a pleasant taste and mild antiseptic properties. Some powders included charcoal, which actually did help whiten teeth, though users often ended up with temporarily blackened gums. The most significant innovation was the addition of soap. By the 1850s, many tooth powders contained small amounts of Castile soap, which helped break down food particles and bacteria. This was revolutionary. For the first time in human history, people were using a true cleaning agent on their teeth, not just an abrasive. The results were immediately noticeable. Breath improved, gums became healthier, and tooth decay began to slow. But perhaps the most important development was the growing understanding of dental hygiene as preventive medicine. Earlier generations had viewed toothaches as inevitable, like gray hair or wrinkles. The 19th century marked the first time that preventing dental problems became a widespread goal. Medical texts began recommending daily tooth cleaning, and some even suggested cleaning after every meal. This shift in thinking would prove more important than any single invention. The wealthy embraced these innovations enthusiastically. Victorian ladies carried ornate silver tooth powder boxes in their reticules. Gentlemen invested in traveling cases with multiple brushes and an array of powders for different occasions. Some households employed special servants whose duties included maintaining the family's dental implements. Elaborate tooth cleaning rituals became part of the morning and evening routines in fashionable homes. Yet, challenges remained. Many tooth powders were still too abrasive, containing pumice or ground pottery that wore away enamel over time. Flavoring agents were often overpowering, masking rather than eliminating bad breath. And despite improvements in mass production, quality control was inconsistent. A brush might last for years or fall apart after a few uses, depending on the manufacturer's standards. The rise of patent medicines brought both promise and peril to dental care. Entrepreneurs marketed miraculous tooth powders claiming to cure everything from toothaches to consumption. Most were harmless if ineffective, but some contained dangerous substances like mercury or lead. The lack of regulation meant consumers had little protection against fraudulent or harmful products. Professional dentistry was emerging simultaneously. The first dental school opened in Baltimore in 1840, establishing dentistry as a legitimate medical profession. These early dentists promoted proper oral hygiene as aggressively as they treated dental diseases. They understood that prevention was far preferable to the painful extractions and crude fillings that had characterized earlier dental care. The invention of anesthesia in the 1840s revolutionized not just surgery, but dental attitudes. For the first time, dental procedures could be performed without excruciating pain. This made people more willing to seek professional dental care and more motivated to prevent problems that might require painful treatment. The fear that had kept many away from dental care began to diminish. Women played a crucial role in advancing dental hygiene during this period. As the primary caregivers in families, they were responsible for teaching children proper tooth cleaning techniques. Women's magazines began featuring articles on dental care, often written by the wives of prominent dentists. This domestic focus helped normalize daily tooth cleaning and made it a family priority rather than an individual choice. Scientific understanding advanced rapidly. Researchers began studying the relationship between diet and tooth decay. Though they wouldn't fully understand the role of bacteria for several more decades, they noticed that people who ate more sugar suffered more dental problems, leading to the first dietary recommendations for dental health. The connection between oral health and general health was also becoming apparent, though the mechanisms remained mysterious. Regional variations in dental care practices reflected local resources and cultural attitudes. In areas with abundant mint, tooth powders often featured strong mint flavoring. Coastal regions incorporated ground shells and seaweed into their formulations. Rural communities continued relying heavily on traditional remedies, often mixing old folk wisdom with new commercial products. The emerging middle class drove demand for dental products that were both effective and fashionable. Manufacturers responded with increasingly sophisticated packaging and marketing. Tooth powder tins featured elaborate labels with testimonials from satisfied customers. Some companies employed traveling salesmen who demonstrated proper brushing techniques in town squares and at county fairs. International trade expanded the range of available ingredients. Exotic oils from Asia, minerals from South America, and herbs from Africa found their way into tooth powders and mouth rinses. This globalization of dental care ingredients led to more varied and often more effective formulations, though it also increased costs and raised questions about quality control. The 19th century also saw the first attempts at standardizing dental care recommendations. Medical societies began issuing guidelines for proper oral hygiene, though these were often ignored by the general public. The concept of professional dental cleanings emerged, though they remained expensive and were primarily available in large cities. Children's dental care received special attention for the first time. Smaller toothbrushes were manufactured specifically for young mouths. Milder tooth powders were formulated to be less intimidating for children. Parents were encouraged to begin cleaning their children's teeth as soon as they appeared, a practice that would have seemed absurd to earlier generations. The century closed with dental care poised for even greater advances. Electric lighting was making detailed dental examinations possible. X-rays were on the horizon, promising to reveal hidden dental problems. And researchers were beginning to understand the bacterial nature of tooth decay, setting the stage for even more effective preventive measures. By 1900, the transformation was complete. What had begun the century as a painful, haphazard process had become a daily routine for millions. The foundation had been laid for modern dental care, built on the twin pillars of effective tools and scientific understanding. The age of truly modern tooth cleaning was about to begin. By the dawn of the 20th century, dental care stood at a crossroads between ancient wisdom and modern innovation. The brutal tooth-pulling and mercury-laden treatments of medieval times were giving way to something revolutionary: scientific understanding. For the first time in human history, people began to grasp why teeth decayed, how disease spread, and what could be done to prevent it rather than simply endure it. The discovery of bacteria in dental plaque wasn't just academic curiosity. It was a revelation that changed everything. Suddenly, the focus shifted from treating decay after it happened to preventing it before it started. Mass-produced toothbrushes, once luxury items for the wealthy, began appearing in ordinary households. Tooth powders evolved from abrasive mixtures of crushed brick and salt to carefully formulated compounds designed to clean without destroying enamel. But perhaps the most significant change wasn't technological, it was cultural. For centuries, tooth loss had been accepted as inevitable, a natural part of aging. Children expected to lose their teeth by adulthood. Adults planned for dentures like they planned for gray hair. This resignation began to crack as the 19th century progressed. Dental hygiene transformed from an afterthought to a daily ritual. The establishment of dental schools marked another turning point. Dentistry evolved from a sideline for barbers and blacksmiths into a legitimate medical profession. Students learned anatomy, studied disease, and practiced techniques on cadavers rather than on living patients who had no other choice. The terrifying uncertainty of medieval dental care gave way to procedures that, while still painful, were at least predictable. Anesthesia changed the entire experience of dental treatment. The introduction of ether and chloroform meant that tooth extraction, once an ordeal of unimaginable agony, became merely unpleasant. Patients no longer needed to be held down by assistants while screaming into leather bits. The fear that had kept people away from dental care for centuries began to diminish. Professional dental instruments replaced the crude tools of earlier eras. Instead of rusty pliers and sharpened nails, dentists wielded precision-crafted forceps, probes, and drills. The difference wasn't just in effectiveness, but in dignity. Patients could maintain some semblance of composure during treatment, rather than enduring medieval torture sessions. The rise of preventive care represented perhaps the most fundamental shift. Rather than waiting for problems to become unbearable, people began visiting dentists for regular examinations. The concept of maintenance, of catching problems early, was revolutionary. For the first time, dental care became proactive rather than reactive. Commercial tooth powders and early toothpastes began appearing in shops and advertisements. Companies like Colgate, founded in the early 1800s, started marketing dental hygiene as essential to health and social acceptance. This wasn't just about preventing pain anymore. Clean teeth became associated with respectability, success, and modern living. The development of better materials for fillings and dental work meant that saving teeth became preferable to extracting them. Mercury amalgam, despite its toxicity, offered a durable alternative to the temporary patches of earlier centuries. Gold and other metals provided options for those who could afford them. The goal shifted from managing tooth loss to preventing it entirely. Public health campaigns began emphasizing dental hygiene alongside other sanitary practices. Schools started teaching children proper brushing techniques. Health departments distributed information about tooth care. What had once been private suffering became a matter of public concern and collective action. The transformation wasn't just medical, but social. Bad teeth had long been markers of poverty and low status. As dental care became more accessible and effective, oral health became democratized. A farmer could potentially maintain better teeth than a nobleman, given proper care and attention. This represented a profound shift in how society viewed health, class, and personal responsibility. Regional variations in dental practices began to standardize as communication and transportation improved. Techniques developed in London could reach rural villages. Innovations from America could influence European practice. The isolation that had kept medieval dental care primitive and localized gave way to shared knowledge and collective progress. The role of diet in dental health became better understood. While medieval people had noticed connections between certain foods and tooth problems, 19th century researchers began to establish scientific links between nutrition and oral health. Sugar, increasingly available but still expensive, was identified as particularly harmful. This knowledge, though not always acted upon, laid groundwork for future preventive strategies. Women's roles in dental care evolved significantly. While medieval tooth care had often been handled by whoever was available, 19th century dental hygiene became increasingly associated with domestic management and maternal responsibility. Mothers were expected to oversee their children's tooth care, monitor family dental health, and make decisions about treatment. This placed dental hygiene within the sphere of household management and family welfare. The psychology of dental care underwent its own transformation. Medieval people had approached tooth problems with resignation and fear. 19th century patients, while still apprehensive, began to view dental care as an investment in their future health and appearance. This shift from fatalism to optimism encouraged people to seek treatment earlier and maintain better daily habits. Technological innovations continued accelerating throughout the century. Improved lighting allowed dentists to see problems more clearly. Better ventilation made dental offices less oppressive. Adjustable chairs provided comfort for both patient and practitioner. These seemingly minor improvements collectively made dental care more tolerable and effective. The standardization of dental education ensured that practitioners across different regions shared common knowledge and techniques. Medical schools began requiring dental training as part of general medical education. Professional societies established standards and shared research. The hit or miss nature of medieval dental care gave way to systematic, evidence-based practice. Economic factors played crucial roles in democratizing dental care, as industrialization created larger middle classes with disposable income. More people could afford regular dental treatment. Competition among practitioners drove innovation and improved service. Insurance concepts, though primitive, began covering some dental expenses. The economic barriers that had made dental care a luxury began slowly eroding. International exchange of ideas accelerated dental progress. Techniques developed in one country quickly spread to others. Scientific journals shared research across borders. Professional conferences brought practitioners together to exchange knowledge. This global collaboration contrasted sharply with the isolated, tradition-bound practices of medieval times. The integration of dental care into general medical practice helped legitimize the field and improve patient outcomes. Doctors began recognizing connections between oral health and overall wellness. This holistic approach replaced the medieval view of teeth as isolated problems to be endured or extracted. By the end of the 19th century, the foundations of modern dentistry were firmly established. Regular brushing with manufactured toothbrushes and tooth powders had become common among the educated classes. Professional dental care was available in most cities and larger towns. Anesthesia had eliminated the worst terrors of dental treatment. Preventive care was gaining acceptance as both practical and economical. The journey from medieval tooth care to modern dentistry represents more than technological progress. It reflects humanity's growing understanding of health, disease, and prevention. The resignation and suffering that characterized dental care for centuries gave way to hope, knowledge, and effective treatment. People no longer had to accept tooth loss as inevitable or endure unbearable pain as the price of relief. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It required generations of accumulated knowledge, countless individual innovations, and gradual changes in social attitudes toward health and hygiene. The medieval world, where tooth problems were solved with prayer, alcohol, and crude extraction, evolved into one where dental care became scientific, systematic, and increasingly humane. The legacy of this transformation extends far beyond dentistry itself. It demonstrates how scientific method, professional education, and technological innovation can collectively overcome seemingly intractable human suffering. The same principles that revolutionized dental care would eventually transform all of medicine, establishing patterns of progress that continue today. As we conclude this journey through the history of dental care, from ancient twigs to modern toothbrushes, from medieval agony to anesthetized procedures, we see reflected the broader story of human progress itself. Each small improvement built upon previous knowledge, each innovation opened possibilities for further advancement. Each generation inherited the accumulated wisdom of those before, while adding their own contributions to the collective understanding. As we reach the dawn of the modern era in dental care, we find ourselves witnessing the culmination of centuries of gradual progress, where the foundations laid by generations of trial and error, scientific inquiry, and technological innovation finally began to coalesce into something resembling contemporary dental practice. The early 20th century marked a pivotal moment when dental hygiene transformed from a collection of folk remedies and primitive interventions into a legitimate branch of medical science, supported by rigorous research, standardized education, and increasingly sophisticated tools and techniques. The establishment of dental schools across Europe and North America created a standardized curriculum that emphasized both theoretical knowledge and practical skills. Students were now required to study anatomy, physiology, chemistry, and pathology before they could practice on patients. This marked a dramatic departure from the medieval traditions of barber surgeons who learned their craft through apprenticeship and often possessed little understanding of the underlying biological processes they were attempting to manipulate. The professionalization of dentistry brought with it ethical standards, licensing requirements, and ongoing education that ensured practitioners maintained their competency throughout their careers. Technological advancement continued to accelerate as the Industrial Revolution provided new materials and manufacturing techniques. The development of vulcanized rubber revolutionized denture construction, making artificial teeth more comfortable and durable than ever before. Steel instruments became sharper and more precise, while improved metallurgy allowed for the creation of dental tools that could withstand repeated sterilization without losing their effectiveness. The introduction of electric lighting in dental offices eliminated the need for practitioners to work by candlelight or rely on natural sunlight, dramatically improving their ability to see and work with precision inside the oral cavity. The growing understanding of microbiology and infection control transformed dental practice from a dangerous procedure fraught with risk of sepsis and death into a relatively safe medical intervention. The work of Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister in developing antiseptic techniques found immediate application in dental offices, where practitioners began sterilizing their instruments and cleaning their hands between patients. This simple but revolutionary change saved countless lives and made dental treatment accessible to people who previously would have avoided it due to the significant risk of life-threatening complications. Public health initiatives began to emerge as governments and medical professionals recognized the connection between oral health and overall well-being. Educational campaigns promoted regular toothbrushing, proper nutrition, and preventive care, marking the beginning of a shift from reactive treatment to proactive maintenance. Schools began teaching children about dental hygiene, and public health officials started tracking oral health statistics to identify trends and develop targeted interventions for at-risk populations. The evolution of toothpaste formulations reflected the growing sophistication of chemical science and manufacturing. Early commercial toothpastes contained harsh abrasives that could damage tooth enamel, but manufacturers gradually refined their formulations to include gentler cleaning agents, flavoring compounds, and eventually therapeutic ingredients designed to prevent decay and gum disease. The standardization of these products meant that consumers could rely on consistent quality and effectiveness rather than the unpredictable results of homemade remedies. Anesthesia continued to improve throughout this period with the development of more effective local anesthetics that could provide pain relief without the risks associated with general anesthesia. The introduction of Novocaine and similar compounds allowed dentists to perform complex procedures while keeping patients comfortable and alert. reducing both the physical trauma of dental work and the psychological barriers that prevented many people from seeking necessary treatment. The design and manufacture of toothbrushes evolved to incorporate ergonomic principles and improved materials. Mass production techniques made quality toothbrushes affordable for ordinary consumers, while innovations in bristle design and handle construction improved their effectiveness and durability. The standardization of toothbrush manufacturing meant that people could replace their worn brushes with identical products, promoting regular replacement and maintaining optimal oral hygiene. Dental photography and record keeping began to play important roles in treatment planning and patient education. Dentists could now document the progression of dental diseases, track the effectiveness of treatments, and communicate more effectively with patients about their oral health status. This systematic approach to dental care represented a significant advance over the haphazard methods of earlier centuries, where treatment decisions were often based on incomplete information and subjective assessments. The development of dental specialization allowed practitioners to focus on specific areas of expertise, leading to improved outcomes in complex cases. Orthodontics emerged as a distinct field dedicated to correcting tooth alignment and bite problems, while oral surgery evolved to address more serious conditions requiring surgical intervention. This specialization meant that patients could receive more targeted and effective treatment for their specific conditions, rather than relying on generalist practitioners who might lack the specialized knowledge needed for optimal results. Research into the causes and prevention of dental diseases accelerated during this period, with scientists beginning to understand the role of bacteria, diet, and genetics in oral health. This knowledge led to the development of more effective prevention strategies and treatment protocols, moving dentistry closer to the evidence-based practice that characterizes modern dental care. The establishment of dental research institutions and professional journals facilitated the sharing of knowledge and promoted continuous improvement in dental practice. The economic aspects of dental care began to evolve as well, with the emergence of dental insurance and payment plans that made treatment more accessible to working-class families. This represented a significant departure from earlier periods when dental care was available only to the wealthy, or when people relied on questionable practitioners who offered cheap but dangerous treatments. The democratization of dental care meant that oral health was no longer a luxury item, but an essential component of overall health maintenance. International cooperation and communication among dental professionals led to the sharing of best practices and innovations across national boundaries. Professional organizations established standards for education, practice, and ethics that helped ensure consistent quality of care regardless of geographic location. This global perspective on dental health represented a remarkable evolution from the isolated, tradition-bound practices of medieval times. The integration of dental care with general medical practice began to emerge as physicians and dentists recognized the interconnections between oral health and systemic health conditions. This holistic approach to healthcare marked a significant advance over the compartmentalized thinking of earlier periods, when dental problems were often viewed as isolated issues unrelated to overall health and well-being. As we reflect on this remarkable journey from medieval dental practices to the early foundations of modern dentistry, we can see how each generation built upon the knowledge and innovations of their predecessors, gradually accumulating the understanding and tools necessary to transform dental care from a crude and dangerous ordeal into a sophisticated medical discipline. The path was neither straight nor smooth, marked by false starts, dangerous experiments, and gradual recognition that traditional approaches were often ineffective or harmful. The courage of early innovators who challenged established practices, despite facing ridicule and professional ostracism, paved the way for the scientific revolution that transformed dental care. Their willingness to experiment, observe, and document their findings created the foundation for evidence-based practice that continues to guide dental care today. The patients who submitted to these early experiments, often enduring significant discomfort and risk, also played a crucial role in advancing dental knowledge and technique. The social and cultural changes that accompanied this dental revolution were equally important in shaping modern oral health practices. The growing emphasis on personal hygiene, the recognition of health as a fundamental right rather than a privilege, and the development of public health infrastructure all contributed to the transformation of dental care from an individual concern to a societal priority. The technological innovations that emerged during this period, from improved manufacturing techniques to the development of new materials and instruments, demonstrated how advances in one field could have profound impacts on seemingly unrelated areas. The Industrial Revolution did not just change how people worked and lived, it fundamentally altered how they could maintain their health and well-being. The educational reforms that accompanied the professionalization of dentistry ensured that future practitioners would have the knowledge and skills necessary to provide effective care while minimizing risks to their patients. The establishment of standardized curricula, licensing requirements, and ongoing professional development created a framework for continuous improvement that helped dental care evolve from a craft learned through apprenticeship to a science-based profession. The economic factors that influenced the development of dental care remind us that access to health services is often determined by social and economic structures rather than purely medical considerations. The gradual expansion of dental care to broader segments of society reflected changing attitudes about social responsibility and the role of government in promoting public health. As we consider the lessons of this historical journey, we can appreciate how the seemingly simple act of cleaning one's teeth connects to broader themes of human progress, scientific discovery, and social development. The evolution of dental hygiene practices reflects humanity's gradual mastery over disease and suffering, achieved through patient observation, careful experimentation, and the accumulation of knowledge across generations. The story of dental hygiene also illustrates the importance of questioning traditional practices and remaining open to new ideas, even when they challenge established beliefs. Many of the most significant advances in dental care came from individuals who were willing to think differently and experiment with new approaches, despite facing skepticism and resistance from their contemporaries. The gradual shift from superstition and folklore to scientific understanding demonstrates how human knowledge progresses through the systematic testing of hypotheses and the careful documentation of results. The dental practitioners who began keeping detailed records of their treatments and outcomes laid the groundwork for the evidence-based medicine that guides contemporary healthcare. The international nature of dental innovation reminds us that scientific progress is a collaborative endeavor that benefits from the sharing of knowledge and ideas across cultural and national boundaries. The techniques and materials developed in one country often found application in others, creating a global network of innovation that accelerated the pace of improvement in dental care. As we conclude this journey through the history of dental hygiene, we can see how the primitive practices of medieval times gradually gave way to the sophisticated, scientific, and humane dental care that emerged in the early 20th century. This transformation was not the result of any single breakthrough or innovation, but rather the cumulative effect of countless small improvements, each building upon the work of previous generations. The dedication of countless individuals, from the barber surgeons of medieval times to the professionally trained dentists of the modern era, created the foundation for contemporary dental practice. Their willingness to learn, experiment, and improve upon existing methods demonstrates the power of human curiosity and determination to overcome challenges and reduce suffering. The patients who endured primitive dental treatments, often with remarkable courage and resilience, also played a crucial role in advancing dental knowledge. Their experiences, both positive and negative, provided the feedback necessary for practitioners to refine their techniques and develop more effective approaches to oral health care. The evolution of dental hygiene practices serves as a compelling example of how human ingenuity, scientific inquiry, and social progress can combine to address fundamental challenges to health and well-being. The journey from crude medieval remedies to early modern dental care demonstrates that even the most entrenched practices can be transformed through persistent effort and the application of scientific principles. This remarkable transformation in dental care reminds us that progress is possible, even in areas where traditional practices seem unchangeable. The gradual accumulation of knowledge, the development of new technologies, and the willingness to challenge established beliefs can lead to fundamental improvements in human health and quality of life. As we settle into the 20th century, the transformation of dental care accelerates dramatically. The establishment of dental schools becomes more widespread, creating a standardized curriculum that ensures future dentists receive proper training in anatomy, chemistry, and surgical techniques. No longer would tooth extraction be left to the local blacksmith or traveling barber. The professionalization of dentistry brings with it a code of ethics, licensing requirements, and continuing education that elevates oral care from a desperate last resort to a preventive science. The discovery of fluoride's protective properties in the early 1900s represents another pivotal moment in this long journey. Communities that consumed naturally fluorinated water showed significantly lower rates of tooth decay, leading to the eventual introduction of fluoridated toothpaste and public water fluoridation programs. This simple chemical compound, when properly applied, could prevent the very cavities that had tormented humanity for millennia. The medieval peasant who lost teeth to decay by age 20 would marvel at this invisible shield that modern chemistry provides. World War I and II, despite their devastation, inadvertently advanced dental care through military necessity. Armies require soldiers with functional teeth for both nutrition and morale. Military dentistry develops rapidly, introducing portable equipment, improved techniques for treating battlefield injuries, and mass screening programs that reveal the shocking state of public dental health. These wartime innovations eventually filter into civilian practice, bringing advanced care to broader populations. The mid-20th century witnesses the refinement of materials that would have seemed magical to earlier generations. Porcelain crowns replace crude metal caps. Synthetic bristles create more effective and hygienic toothbrushes. Antibiotics revolutionize treatment of dental infections that once proved fatal. Root canal therapy, though still uncomfortable, becomes a viable alternative to extraction. The dental drill, powered by electricity and later compressed air, allows for precise removal of decay while preserving healthy tooth structure. Perhaps most significantly, the concept of preventive dentistry takes root. Rather than waiting for problems to develop, the modern approach emphasizes regular cleaning, examination, and early intervention. The 6-month dental visit becomes a cultural norm, a routine that would bewilder our ancestors who sought dental care only in extremis. Professional teeth cleaning removes tartar and plaque that even the most diligent home care cannot eliminate completely. The evolution of anesthesia continues beyond simple pain relief. Local anesthetics become safer and more effective, allowing for complex procedures to be performed comfortably in office settings. Sedation dentistry emerges for anxious patients, acknowledging that dental fear, rooted in centuries of traumatic experiences, requires compassionate management. The terror that once accompanied any dental procedure gradually gives way to routine acceptance. Public health campaigns begin emphasizing the connection between oral health and overall wellness. Research reveals links between gum disease and heart conditions, diabetes, and other systemic illnesses. The mouth, long viewed as separate from the rest of the body, is finally understood as an integral part of human health. This holistic perspective drives improvements in both treatment and prevention. The latter half of the 20th century brings technological marvels that accelerate progress exponentially. X-ray technology allows dentists to see problems before they become symptomatic. High-speed drills reduce treatment time and discomfort. Improved lighting and magnification enable more precise work. Water fluoridation programs dramatically reduce childhood tooth decay across entire populations. Modern toothpaste formulations incorporate not just fluoride, but also ingredients to fight tartar, whiten teeth, and address specific conditions like sensitivity. The simple act of brushing, once accomplished with frayed twigs and salt, becomes a sophisticated chemical treatment delivered through engineered bristles designed for optimal plaque removal. Dental floss, introduced in the early 1800s but not widely adopted until much later, finally gains recognition as essential for removing bacteria between teeth where brushes cannot reach. This simple string represents the culmination of understanding about bacterial causes of dental disease that eluded healers for centuries. The transformation from medieval dental horror to modern preventive care illustrates humanity's remarkable capacity for progress through accumulated knowledge. each generation built upon previous discoveries, gradually replacing superstition with science, brutality with precision, and desperation with prevention. The barber surgeon pulling teeth with crude pliers gives way to the skilled professional using refined instruments and proven techniques. Today's routine dental visit, with its comfortable chair, bright lights, and gentle procedures, represents the end point of this extraordinary journey. The fluoride treatment that strengthens tooth enamel, the professional cleaning that removes harmful bacteria, the careful examination that catches problems early, all these represent victories won through centuries of human curiosity and determination. The story of dental hygiene reflects broader themes of human progress. It shows how traditional knowledge, even when flawed, can contain seeds of truth that later scientific investigation validates and improves. It demonstrates how professional standards and education elevate crafts into sciences. It reveals how public health measures can benefit entire populations simultaneously. Most importantly, this long evolution from primitive tooth care to modern dentistry illustrates the power of incremental improvement. No single discovery transformed dental care overnight. Instead, countless small advances, each building upon previous knowledge, gradually created the sophisticated system we know today. The ancient Egyptian chewing antimicrobial herbs, the medieval monk copying dental remedies, the 19th century inventor improving toothbrush design, the 20th century researcher studying fluoride, all contributed to this collective achievement. As we drift toward the end of this journey through dental history, it's remarkable to consider how far we've traveled from those dark medieval chambers where desperate souls sought relief from agonizing toothaches. The transformation from crude iron tools wielded by barber surgeons to today's precision instruments represents more than technological progress. It reflects humanity's persistent drive to reduce suffering and improve quality of life. The path wasn't always smooth or swift. Centuries passed between the first crude toothbrushes made from twigs and the mass-produced versions that revolutionized oral hygiene. Generations lived and died before scientists understood that tiny bacteria, not evil spirits, caused tooth decay. Yet each small discovery built upon the last, creating an ever-expanding foundation of knowledge that continues to support modern dental practice. Perhaps most fascinating is how dental care evolved from a luxury of the wealthy to a fundamental aspect of public health. The introduction of fluoride alone prevented countless cavities and transformed entire communities. School-based dental education programs reached children who might never have learned proper brushing techniques otherwise. These seemingly simple innovations had profound impacts on human health and happiness across all social classes. The shift from treatment to prevention represents one of dentistry's greatest achievements. Instead of waiting for problems to become unbearable, modern dental care emphasizes regular checkups, cleanings, and early intervention. This preventive approach has saved millions of teeth that would have been lost in earlier eras, when extraction was often the only option. Today's dental patients can hardly imagine the fear and pain that once accompanied even routine procedures. The development of effective anesthesia, sterile techniques, and advanced materials has made dental care not just bearable, but often completely comfortable. What once required tremendous courage now requires little more than keeping an appointment. As you settle into sleep tonight, you can appreciate that the simple act of brushing your teeth connects you to thousands of years of human ingenuity and care. From ancient Egyptians chewing medicinal twigs to modern dentists using digital imaging, each generation has contributed to the remarkable story of dental health. The boring, everyday routine of oral hygiene represents one of humanity's quiet triumphs, a victory over pain, infection, and ignorance that continues to benefit us all.